All right, everybody, so let's tackle tasks number 5 and 6 on this worksheet, 1.3.c. So what we have here is a bunch of student names, and we have each of their calculated grades. All right, these were copied over from one of the previous examples we used, and some of these grades aren't looking too hot. These look pretty low in terms of performance on quiz grades, but we're just going to use this as an example to play around with the numbers. So, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be calculating a rounded version of the student's grades. So let's read through the instructions. Your teacher has calculated the average grades for each student in their class. Now your teacher wants to figure out the following. What grade the student has earned, rounded up. So we basically just want to take any of these grades with a decimal and bring them up to the next level. Even if it's something like 53.1, that's still going to round up to a 54. We might as well give the student that point because, hey, they earned some form of those points. And then we also want to figure out how many A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's students have earned. Okay? So in column D, round up each grade to the nearest whole number. So students get that extra point if their grade has a decimal. In column E, round each grade to the nearest tens place. You'll use a -1 as the indicator of how many decimal places to round. Okay? And then finally, in cells G3 through G7, we'll determine how many students obtained A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's. And you can do this by counting the number of each rounded grade in column E. So I know this isn't the perfect way to determine grades, but this is kind of just something that the teacher can take a look at and say, like, what's the averageness of my student's performance? How many A's, how many B's, how many C's, how many D's, and how many F's? So what we're going to do, I'm first going to put in these ranges just so we have them as just kind of like a base level, just so everyone's kind of on the same page. So these are what the grade ranges would be. Like an A is a 90 to 100, B is 80 to 89, C is 70 to 79, D is 65 to 69, and then F is 0 to 65. So we're not going to get perfect ranges of where they stand. We're more just going to take their grade, like if they got, let's say, a 76, and we're going to round that to the 80s and say, yeah, that's close enough to a B. Is it perfect? No, but it's just a very simple way for us to play around with some rounding formulas just to see how this stuff works. All right, but the first thing I want to do is I want to do this rounding here, the rounded grade. Now every student deserves that little extra bump, so let's take care of that. So instead of just using round, we're going to use round up. And then we're going to put in parentheses. I'm going to say this is the value that I'd like to round up, and then comma, I get to put the number of places that I want it to round to. The thing is, though, I don't need to round it to any places except for the whole number, so I don't even need to put that value in. When I press enter, it turns into 76. Let's do a little experiment, though. Let's see if I were to put in comma 0. All right, it still gave us the same answer. So it's kind of interesting or kind of handy that if we don't need to specify the number of places, we can just remove them. And then just like before, we're going to work on magic with these functions. Click that little blue square, drag it all the way down, release, and we have all of our grades. This 53 went up to a 54, even though it's a 53.1, so it's super close to 53. We're going to give them the benefit of the doubt because, hey, let's recognize some efforts here. All right, and now we need to round to the tens place. So in order for us to do that, let's take a look. In column E, round each grade to the nearest tens place. You will use a -1 as the indicator of how many decimal places to round. Oh, cool. Okay. So we're going to put in equals round, parentheses. We have to choose the value. I'm going to choose their rounded grade because I'm going to be generous about this. And then comma, this is where we get to put in that -1 as the decimal indicator, because the -1 brings it from the decimal over to the tens place. Not the tenths place, but the tens. All right, so this 76 goes up to an 80. Cool. Let's use our magic formula extender, bring it all the way down, and boom. Now we got nice clean numbers divisible by 10. And now we're going to use this as kind of an indicator to figure out how many of each of these grades we have running. So this first one, I didn't see any 90s or 100s in here, but I think we do need to write this first function out. So that is an equals count if, remember that's one that we've been playing around with for a while, parentheses. I'm going to choose my range, which is this entire range right here, comma, and then I get to put in my rule. Now an A counts as a 90 or a 100. So I'm going to put in greater than equal to 90. And when I close my parentheses, we didn't have any 90s or 100s, but that's okay. Let's take a look at the B. That'll be a little bit more easy for us to calculate. Equals count if, parentheses. We're going to choose this range again. And then I'm going to put a comma, and all I have to do is put in an 80, because that's the thing that I'm looking for. We have 3 B's in this class, cool. And I'm just going to count, let's say, yeah, C's. So C's will be 70s, so it's going to be equals count if, parentheses, choose our range, comma, 70s. And I'm going to let you finish for part D and also for part F. All right. Now again, these aren't perfect, accurate representations of exactly what grade range they're in, but we're just kind of using the rounded system to just be a little bit of a guide for us to just kind of see, like, well, about how many A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's do I have in this situation? All right, so that's our first task. Let's move on to the second one. All right, so now this one is going to be a bit of a challenge. What I found is all of the Avengers released from, I think it's 2000 to 2015. And it is quite a big data set. It is 1,424 rows long. I'm going to put that as a hint up here because we're going to need it when we type in our ranges, because I am not going to be dragging all the way down 1,400 rows of data. All right. So that is just going to be a little bit of a hint for us to look at. Let's take a look at this data, though. We have the name of our Marvel character, their eye color, their hair color, their gender, and the year that they were introduced. All right. So you were in a debate with a friend about several topics within the Marvel characters in the comic book universe. Your friend makes the following claims. 1. Marvel released the most characters in 2005. 2. Most of the Marvel characters introduced in this timeline were male. And 3. More characters have black hair than those that have brown hair. So we're going to use our knowledge of functions to either prove whether it's true or false. So this is one of those examples where we actually get to apply our knowledge and our skills. So how are we going to figure this out? Well, let's see. We have the Marvel releasing the most characters in 2005. Well, what could I do? We have all this different space and places to play around and plug in data. And I just gave you some space to kind of write in notes and information. So why don't I do year, why don't we do number, no, let's just put in 2005 characters. Basically, how many of them do we have? Well, how would we figure that out? Well, this goes back to one of the old things that we were playing around with. It's going to be a function. It's going to be equals count if, parentheses. We're going to choose this range. Now remember, I'm not dragging all the way down to the bottom. I'm lazy. I'm just going to put the colon and then E1424, comma, 2005. All right, so there are 107 characters that are released or were released in 2005. So how could I disprove it? I'm just going to try years. So we're just going to try a bunch of different years here and there and see exactly if any of those years happen to work for us. First thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy this whole function. I am not about rewriting functions if we have something similar. I'm going to start with 2000. Press enter. 130. We just proved it wrong. Boom. In the year 2000, more of them were released. If we didn't have the answer, well, then I'd move it to 2001. Try a count of that. 67. Nope. 2002. 99. Nope. 2003. 94. Nope. 2004, 116. So all I have to do now is put in an indicator, 2004 characters, and then I can put in, obviously, it was not in the year 2005. Now, how would you have proven this if the 2005 characters were actually, the highest number? Well, you'd probably want to go through all of the years and very quickly crank out that data. Luckily, we were able to disprove that, and it only took us a couple minutes, and honestly, our first result gave us the answer that we wanted. All right, so this is just a nice, easy way to prove them wrong. Oh, you said 2005 had the most characters? Actually, 2005 had 107 characters, and 2004 had 116 characters. You're automatically wrong. Boom. First problem solved. All right. So now the next one, most of the Marvel characters introduced were male. Well, I'm not going to show you exactly how to do this with functions, but I am going to kind of leave it open with some guidelines. It looks like under the gender, there's female and male. There may be other values. There may be blank or missing if there's not a clear representation, or gender fluid, or any other type of gender characterization within this data set. I didn't particularly make this data set. I found it online through the Marvel database, but it does kind of lend some knowledge onto how Marvel was qualifying this information. So what they're saying now is most of the Marvel characters introduced were male. All you really need to do is, figure out a count of the male characters, count of the female characters. Perhaps you want to find the other types of classifications and count those. Count the blanks inside of here. Count any of them that are gender fluid was one of the values in here as well. And you could even do a count unique to figure out how many unique values are within that gender set. All right, I'm not asking you to go to the end of the earth and back to figure this stuff out, but what I am asking you to do is try to count and characterize as many of these as you think is necessary. And then you can have the information. You could say, well, here's the number of female characters, here's the number of male characters, here's the number of missing characters, and here's the number of gender fluid characters, and here's the number of any other characterization on there. Just kind of ordered them in the order that I discovered them while scrolling through the list. Not trying to put any ranking or anything on those values. All right, and then finally, the last one, more characters have black hair than those that have brown hair. Well, that would just be another situation where you just want to count how many of these values are black hair and how many of these characters are brown hair. And again, it's just kind of going through and using a formula that we're familiar with. This is serving as kind of like a refresher on some previous tasks that we did. And we can use that in the mind of like statistics and information like that as well. So if there are any questions, be sure to ask me. And take your time with this and don't feel like you have to check every single possible value ever. Use your intuition and kind of look over the data for a couple minutes to figure it out.